This is what a Sega Game Gear should look like, and here's what I've got to start with. An old shoebox, full of parts. Now, a lot of these parts have come from older projects that I've worked on, and just from collecting old tech over the years. Here I'm just trying to get a good feel for which one of these shell pieces is going to be in best condition for our completed console. And there's not a ton of parts here, but I think we should have just enough to be able to make a complete unit. This one looks the best to me. Taking a look at these rear shells, this one's got the boards that we need. I think this other one though, it's going to look in a lot better shape. There's less scratches and dings on it, looks better to me at least. We'll have to swap out this audio board though. I'll just go ahead and recap that other one. I do only have this one motherboard, so hopefully we can get this thing going again. If not, this project is kind of dead in the water. You can see the capacitors haven't leaked too bad, but we'll for sure be replacing those. Here we've got our assortment of screws and buttons. That of course will be useful. And here's a capacitor kit I ordered forever ago. That's going to come in handy. Okay, so first things first, we got to test this motherboard and get a good sense of what's working and what's not so we know where to start. Just plugging in those daughter boards there. We can kind of temporarily get this thing plugged in and closed up. Of course, we have to add all six AA batteries to this thing. Let's throw my copy of Sonic in there. Hey, red light's on. And the screen's coming through a little bit. Those horizontal lines are pretty bad, no audio, so the capacitors on this are definitely shot. But now we know where to start. Let's turn our attention to the rear shell here and start getting this thing stripped down. I really like using this little Klein Tools kit. I think I picked it up for like 30 bucks. It's got most of the bits I've ever needed in there. There's a couple like game bits and stuff that it doesn't have, but it's been a fantastic little kit. Shielding's coming off. Here's the audio board. We'll definitely be putting new capacitors on this, try to get that audio back on. Here's the power board. It's got this black little cover that covers those battery terminals. Really difficult to get off. Pretty dirty. I haven't bent my tweezers trying to get this one apart. Yeah, we'll be putting new capacitors on this one too. Also, Sega decided to make the speaker the hardest thing to get in and out of this console ever. It's soldered to the plastic. Now we can go ahead and turn our attention over to the capacitors. They're these little black square things on the board. I'm just pointing them out quickly here. Diagram would probably be more helpful, but there they are. Here's what we're going to be replacing them with. Now, as we get this iron warmed up, I usually run about 360, 65. We can turn our attention over here to this capacitor. You see the 10 microfarads, 16 volts there. We're just going to match that up to our replacement kit. And now when you go to replace these, the microfarads are the only critical part. The voltage, as long as it's higher, should be fine. You can see this old one. I'm just tearing it apart so you can kind of see it. It's just encased in that plastic and then glued to the board. So rocking it back and forth like that will fatigue the legs and allow you to get it off the board. I feel like removing capacitors like that can be hit or miss. If your pads are super damaged, then you can tear them up by choosing to remove the capacitors that way. But it's easy enough to get some flux on there and go ahead and remove those legs with the soldering iron as you're tinning up your pads. I like to clean up as I go too, just keeps that flux from getting everywhere and makes things a little easier to solder. Now polarity is really important. You can see that positive symbol there. That designates how we bend these legs. Also, yes, it took me like 30 minutes to find that capacitor after it flew off. Next we can reflux those pads and go ahead and tack our bent capacitor into place, making very sure that the positive leg is going to the positive side. You can see the negative leg designated by that silver stripe, so make sure those are facing the right way. Now we just have to do the rest of them. And yes, I know, don't judge me too hard, that's not the ideal way to take off a capacitor, but it is the fastest. Well, until you break something. Now, I've recapped a few of these, but I never really had a Game Gear growing up. I was more in the Game Boy Advanced era, which I really want to make a video about soon, so stay tuned. but my dad had one, and he used to tell me about it. When my dad was a little kid, they used to live in the middle of nowhere, and I guess he and his brother had to take a pretty long bus ride out to the nearest boarding school. My grandpa really wanted them to stay out of trouble and have something to do on this long bus ride, so he saved up, and he bought them a Game Gear. I even remember my dad telling me they had the TV tuner that they'd try to use on their way to school. I think my dad, he probably would have had to been a senior in high school when this Game Gear came out. But I guess they had a lot of memories tied up in that thing, because several years ago, my uncle dug it out of an old box and he brought it to me to fix. And it was kind of the same story, you know, the capacitors went bad. I feel like on Game Gears that's pretty ubiquitous. These capacitors really like to leak and degrade, so I was able to get it going for him again, and I brought it to my dad after I got it working, and as soon as he booted the thing up, I saw him start to tear up, which was very strange. I can count on one hand the times that I've seen my dad tear up, but you know, Grandpa's gone, and the Game Gear's still here, and I'm sure having that thing working again reminded them of him. And you know, that's got to be my favorite part about working on this old technology is, at the end of the day, yes, it is just stuff, but there can be a lot of really happy memories associated with some of this old tech, and it's a lot of fun to keep it going and keep it operational. You know, if it brings somebody a smile and a happy memory, then I think it's worth it to keep these things running. Also, a quick note as I'm finishing up putting these capacitors in, this is an electrolytic kit, which if I was to go back and do this again, I'd probably use one of the ceramic kits. Ceramic capacitors tend to be a little bit more robust. I think they last a ton longer than these electrolytic capacitors will, because at some point these will fail and they'll have to be replaced again. And also those ceramic capacitors are much easier to install. You don't have to worry about bending the legs and getting everything trimmed appropriately. Closing the case up with these electrolytic capacitors can also be a little bit tricky. You've got to have everything laying down and out of the way, and using a ceramic kit would eliminate a lot of that headache. So if I were to do it again, that's the direction that I would take. Also, while we're in here, as we're cleaning everything up, don't forget about the cartridge slot there, any of the ports, the contrast and volume wheels. All that stuff's really important to just get some isopropyl alcohol in there and make sure to clean it up. And just like that, we got all new capacitors on this motherboard. Next up is the power board. This one's not overtly difficult. There's only 3 capacitors on here. I just like to re-tin the pins and then get some downward pressure on those capacitors as I heat both sides there, and it's usually pretty good about coming out. And some solder wick to try to clear up some of those through holes. Sometimes I'm not able to get all the solder, so I kind of cheat it, and then I just heat up both sides as I push that new capacitor through, and that liquid solder will allow that capacitor to stick up through those holes. And then yeah, get some good heat on there, get good joints and trim them up, and that should be it. A little isopropyl in the power switch there is to keep it operational, and should be good to go on this one. Now for the audio board. I don't know why, this thing always seems to give me quite a lot of grief, actually. It's not that it's super hard. There's just some pretty tight places that you have to solder these capacitors onto, and I've got some big old fingers, which makes it pretty difficult for me to do. I think in the future having a ceramic capacitor kit would make this a whole lot easier. But for now, I'll just do my best. I've trimmed the legs on these capacitors a little differently as well. This corner one needs to sit about upright to be able to get in there, so you got to trim the legs pretty short to get it to fit in there. Also, it's important to note the cartridge shielding sits over top of this board by by a small margin, so sometimes you have to get a little creative, as you've seen I've done here, to get these capacitors laying down flat enough to be able to fit that shielding. And again, a little bit of isopropyl in the moving parts there, and a good clean, and we should be good to go on this one too. I thought I'd show this quickly. In order to strip this shell down for cleaning, there's a little tab that you need to push in to pull these battery contacts out. So you can see I'm pushing down the tab, and then pressure gets put on the back side so they'll clear. This one's pretty corroded, we'll have to fix that. But they're not hard to get out. I've got quite a few separate buttons and screws, so we'll have plenty to choose from. A little vinegar here actually goes a long way in cleaning these battery contacts, so I'll leave those soaking. And you can see the ones still in the shell also have a little bit of corrosion on them, so I'll quickly get some vinegar on those, and we can kind of leave this soaking as we turn our attention to the rest of the parts here. I was pretty happy I even found this extension port cover. I can't forget to clean that. On this shell here, there's only what I can assume is dead skin cell dust from 30 years ago, so we're gonna want to make sure to clean those pretty good. I'd like to note here too, I try not to scrub that back sticker too hard. I've had some of them peel up on me before, but as long as you dry them out quick, they're usually fine. Now I had to get a little bit creative here. I really didn't want to take the screen lens off, honestly just me being a little bit lazy, but I also didn't want the water to dry between the screen lens and the plastic shell there. So this air compressor actually worked really well, and it's something I'll probably use just drying out plastic parts in the future. This worked pretty nice. I always forget how big of a difference cleaning parts makes. These look so much better than they did. I'm excited to get this thing reassembled. You can see me there reopening that tab. That'll be important to get those battery terminals to clip in appropriately. It's also really worth paying attention to the direction of these. There's not only one way they can go, and I put them in wrong like 3 times. Now the boards can go back into the shell. There's the audio board, there's the power board there, and on the cover that goes over those battery terminals, I put a little bit of isopropyl alcohol, and it actually softened the adhesive and made it stick way better. There it is. Now we can lay the cartridge shield down, which you will have problems with if those capacitors aren't laying flat enough on the audio board. And look at that, all our skin dust is gone. There's actually 2 separate styles of D-pad. There's one with a metal ball and one without, but the one with the metal ball, you see me pointing to there, needs the recess in the D-pad, as I'm pointing out, and you can't swap the 2. I'm not sure at what point they switched those 2 styles, but yeah, they're not interchangeable. Now's a good time to clean up the speaker too. This one's really dirty. Do be careful on these. It is a pretty thin plastic membrane. You can rupture it pretty easily. To get the thing back in the Game Gear though, it's kind of tricky. I switched to a wide tip on my soldering iron and just melted the plastic back together. I hate this design, but this ended up working pretty well. Motherboard's going in. It's important to remember that little rubber gasket that goes around the screen when you put this in, and also a good time to clear out any dust under the lens. I've also always thought it humorous that the cartridge slot takes like 2 massive screws. Like they're triple the size of any other screw in the Game Gear. But now it's time to plug in these daughter boards. and go ahead and start closing everything up. It's also important to know that the Game Gear uses this game bit screw. I just bought a pretty inexpensive little dedicated screwdriver to put these in. Alright, after putting all 37 batteries in the back of this thing, we can finally power it up. I'm actually really pleased with the way that this thing turned out. I'm excited that a recap was all that it needed to fire up properly again, and all things considered, it's in pretty good shape. I was a little nervous I wasn't going to have all the parts that I needed in that parts bin there, but yeah, we had everything we needed to kind of piece this thing together. I am a little disappointed. There is some corrosion, some screen bleed going on behind the LCD panel. That's obviously something that I can't fix, but I do feel like that makes it a really good candidate to do an IPS screen replacement or something similar in the future. Let me know down in the comments too what other mods that you guys have seen for the Sega Game Gear and what you'd like to see. I do think it'd be a ton of fun to modernize this thing completely and give it to my dad. That'd be a really fun video to make. Well, that's all for today. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like. If you'd like to see more videos like this in the future, please consider subscribing. And as always, thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.